Hey, this is Charles Caldwell, and this is the video for Milestone 2 for App Deployment 2. So this week we worked on the restaurant's home screen tab. We also worked on the restaurant's detail screen, as well as the edit screen for the entrees. So just like last week, we're going to demo the app using Visor and also have a list of all the Milestone 2 task items. So let's go ahead and jump on the computer and take a look. Okay, here we are on the computer, and we're looking at a Visor running my Moto, or displaying my Moto X 2013 edition, running Android 5.1, and we see our milestone task items over here. So let's go ahead and jump into the app. And we'll notice right off the bat that we have a new tab up here. It's labeled restaurants, whereas last week we just had entrees. And what we're going to do is just go ahead and take a look at the three screens that we worked on this past week. They did affect, some of the changes that we made to these three screens did affect a couple of the other screens. And we'll just take a quick glance at some of the past screens and any changes that we had to make to those. So as first, what we can do is tap on restaurants and go over here and see a list of the restaurants that we have. But we can also swipe back and forth between these two, because that's kind of the user experience that users will expect with this type of tabbed interface. And we see we have a list of all the restaurants that we have stored via these entrees here, and we have a list of how many entrees we liked at those particular locations. And tapping into either one of these will take us to the restaurant's details page that we'll see in just a second. But I want to show off the functionality of the search feature up here that we also added. Now, this search feature so far only works on restaurants. Next week, we have one of our milestone items is having the search feature work for the entrees as well. So if we just type in, say, Apple, hit the search button down there, and we'll see it filters it out to Applebee's. If we hit just A, then we see we get all those that have an A in them. And then if we hit Z, none of them have Z, so we'll just get an empty screen. And hitting that X and closing it brings up all of them again. So let's go into one of these. Let's go into the Applebee's one. Now notice there's no address at this time. Now that won't be populated until we implement the restaurant edit screen, which is a milestone 3 item. And the same thing goes for the map. The map, even though the icon is there and there's some functionality, that won't actually take us to the map screen because the map screen is part of milestone 3. Same with this edit button up here. Okay. So that's getting implemented in milestone 3. Now down here at the bottom, our original design was to have a grid down here, very similar to the this, which we have on the main screen, but instead we have this list view that has these different colors, and that was really due to the issue I had putting a grid view or a list view inside of a scroll view. This entire thing is a scroll view, and I did in the end use an implementation that actually kind of expands the list view and shows the entire list view or grid view all at once. But using a grid view with the pictures in there, it would have circumvented that functionality. The functionality in the grid view of recycling the images and removing some of the images out of the grid view and putting new ones in, and revealing all the images at once would have kind of been a drain on the device's resources. Now, if you were a client, I would explain to you how a grid view doesn't actually load all the images at once, but rather shuffles them in and out, and how it does this to save on memory. And I would mention how using a list view here saves on the processing the device has to do, and hence saves on performance if the user starts entering tons of entrees. But how we obviously shouldn't penalize the user for entering too many entrees into our app. So essentially, causing more of a memory drain, and we shouldn't penalize the user for using the app. So those are some things I'd end up explaining to the client and justifying this design change. However, to be perfectly honest, I really don't like the way this looks down here. I'm sure there's got to be a better way that it can be done. I just don't have the time to work on to kind of rework the screens. And also it kind of makes it possible for red and green to appear right next to each other, which is very taxing on the eyes based on color theory. So if we can tap on either one of these, and it'll go into the detailed view that we did last week. All these are the same. And if we change one of these, it's like all of a sudden we like that. When we went back, we'll see that it changed there. And this is our go-to item, which is based on tapping this and sharing that. And we'll notice that unlike last week where there was no restaurant listed, this time there is a restaurant listed, and there will be a restaurant listed for all the items, since restaurant is actually one of the required fields, but that now works, whereas last week it did not. And the edit button did not work last week, but let's go ahead and show that off this week. Let's close this keyboard so we can see the entire screen. And it's basically just the new entree screen, but it has the values already filled in, and it actually has a smaller image up here than on the new entree screen. And I actually do plan on going back and eventually changing that for the new entree screen. So we can change the name of the entree, we can change the restaurant name, and actually if we did change the restaurant name, it could potentially add an additional restaurant to our restaurant list. We can change all the details here. Even retake the photo if we wanted. I'm going to tap that retake photo, and as we can see, it brings up the camera. But let's back out of that. So let's just make sure we covered everything here. We covered the list view, which is this thing up here. Backing out. Is this thing here. The custom list adapter. I marked 3 hours for that. It really didn't take me 3 hours of time, but I kind of reallocated that time to redesign the content provider because and that was actually one of my struggles this week. In past classes, we worked with content providers in regards to interacting with databases. So I naturally went that route while building this app. I use a content provider to interact with the SQLite database. However, it turns out that was not really the correct route to take. I built a custom class that interacts with the database more directly than the content provider. And there still is a content provider that interacts with the entrees, and that's only because it currently works. So I don't really have time to go in and remove it. But there's a custom class that interacts with the restaurants directly with the database. And we saw the search feature. And as we saw that we could retake a photo. We could change the rating. We have all those edit fields that we could just change the values. The save button, validation. Let's just go ahead and show that works in the edit screen. Let's actually go over to one of these. Go in, edit, and if we tried to completely remove this and then try to save it, we'd see that we get an error there. And just to show that the value does change the database, let's change the value of this to just peanut butter. Now we see it changed there, and it changed there. And we saw that we could cancel an edit action. We actually did that earlier in the video. We saw the edit button. It doesn't actually do much, but it is there, and it does have a unclick listener on it. We saw the text views. We saw the map button. We saw, again, it doesn't really go anywhere, but it does have a listener on it. We saw that we have that go-to entree view right here, and we saw the list view down here that shows all the entrees just for this restaurant. All these entrees are just this restaurant. No other entrees are down here. So that's it for now. Next week, it's the final week, we'll be adding some location functionality. We're going to enable the user to edit their restaurant info and place a map on it. Or place the restaurant on a map, rather. We'll also allow the user to record the location data of the restaurant while they are entering a new entree. So they could just click a checkbox somewhere. I don't think that checkbox is in the design. I'll have to go back and double check that. But they'll be able to put in a checkbox saying that they are currently at the restaurant that they are entering it for. We'll also show them what restaurants are closest to them when they open the app, and that will be a brand new tab over here called Nearest. And we'll also spend some time squashing some bugs and getting the app to run just a little smoother. So until then, thank you for watching.